First one that we want to talk about is Rule 161. There's a new section of it, and it has to do with wristbands for defensive players. A couple things that you just want to note here is that the wristband has to be a single color, and it needs to be a single solid color. And what you'll see in the new rule is that pitchers, it cannot contain the colors of white or gray, or it cannot be distracting. And there'll be other slides here that they'll keep going through this. But the other piece on Rule 161 is that it needs to be worn on their forearm. And for pitchers, it needs to be opposite their throwing hand. So if there is a penalty for this, if they're not complying the first time, it's a warning to the coach involved, and the next offender will be ejected along with the head coach. So anytime you have something like that, you just want to explain to the coach what the violation is. Tell them that we need to fix it now and move on. But you should let him know that if we have to eject the next offender, he also will be going with it. So again, this will show you just some other examples. Here it is that the player is able to wear the play card on the wristband, and if he is a shortstop or second baseman or non-pitcher, the arm that he has it on, it doesn't really matter. Again, when he bats, he's able to wear it, but it has to be on his wrist. And the other thing that it says here, that it doesn't have to match their uniform. Now, from a pitcher's standpoint, again, he can wear the playing card, but he must wear it on his non-throwing arm. And it cannot contain the colors gray or white or be distracting. So sometimes they have a plastic shield on there that if it's a sunny day, which anybody in Illinois knows the first couple of months of the season, there's not much sunshine, it seems like. But if there's a glare, then you could ask him to, I would tell you to recommend maybe he turns it inside and not have it on the outside if we find it distracting. I would recommend you do that first, and then if it still seems to be distracting, just ask him to remove it. All right, again, the penalty, you warn. And then the second offense, it's the head coach, and they are ejected. And guys, anytime that we have something like this, this is for our benefits. You need to understand the rules. Obviously, we're not here to eject people. We're here to have them comply. And I think what the Federation is doing is giving us ammunition to say, hey, if we find a future offenders coach, not only is he going, but you're going with him. And I think, head coaches will cooperate with you, all right, because they don't want to leave the game, and they probably don't want to lose a player or something of this nature that's controllable. All right, now what's new to us, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in a lot of schools, but they are now allowing one-way electronic communication devices, and it's from the dugout to the catcher, and the only person who can wear it is the catcher. And again, the key thing here is that it has to be a one-way communication device. And I think the goal here is, first of all, we see this on at the collegiate level, and we see it as well at the major league level. But now we're hoping to speed the game up, right? So now the coach can signal to him curveball, and he could throw down his sign. Or even if it's a code 122. But the key things here is the coach cannot be outside the dugout. And I'm going to show you some pictures here, what we'll talk about. The main thing here, when they say cannot be outside the dugout or bench area, is to really control them so that they're not using it in the coach's box, which they couldn't because they'd be on offense. But the other piece of this is so that they're not down at the bullpen calling pitches. They want them in the dugout area. Again, it's a team warning, and then the next offender of that team is ejected along with the head coach. So you could see the trend here. So a coach may use a one-way communication device to communicate to the catcher for calling pitches, and that's the main purpose. Again, the catcher cannot communicate with him with a microphone, but there's nothing saying to him, hey, can you repeat that? Maybe he didn't hear it, but it's as long as it's a one-way device. And guys, you're probably going to know it, and if you because anybody who's done football, they'll probably use these Midland radios. Someone did say that someone's coming out with a device that's being used at the collegiate level where it's a smaller device than a Midland radio, but it just gives them the one-way communication. And you'll see your catcher with an earpiece in it. This is an example. Obviously, don't get hung up on the picture because that would be an illegal helmet and setup. But I think the demonstration here is that there's the one-piece communication. You could see something on his belt, and it's only for the catcher and the purposes of calling pitches. This is the example that they're going to use. It says it must remain in a dugout or bench area. Folks, a lot of people want to think that this is going to also help to keep the coaches inside. I know in Illinois, we'll have coaches on a bucket, and they'll be right in front of the dugout so that they can give signals to their catchers for calling pitches. If we now have these one-way devices, it is a way for you to keep them in the dugout. But if the coach, and this is me talking, and I would strongly suggest this to you, I wouldn't have a problem if he was standing 2 feet in front of that dugout right there and giving his signals, because that's still considered a bench area, but I wouldn't let him come too far out. So that's this illustration, and that's what they're really talking about. But our goal is to get them in the dugout, and in this case, there's no fence, and so if he was standing right there, I wouldn't have a problem with it. This is just, again, reiterating, no other team members are allowed to use the electronic device to communicate with anybody. It can only strictly be the catcher and the coach. Warning, ejection. All right. Another change this year, which I think is a good one, is forfeiting a game. What they've gotten rid of now is, before, you used to read by spectators, coaches, players, or team bench personnel. They have removed the word spectators. We can no longer forfeit a game because of spectators. What they want us to do is they want us to stop the game, get a hold of home team management, go to at least the head coach, see who's on site. Some places will have an AD or somebody on site and say, I need you to address this person, and we need to have them removed from the game because we're not going to keep going. But so we can no longer forfeit. And here's a story. I went the other night to go to a girls' sectionals was being held this week here in Illinois, and sure enough, by the fourth quarter, they had stopped the game to have a fan removed, and they did it very professionally. They stopped the game. They went to the table. They asked for the administration to come. The administration dealt with the spectator, and they removed him, and the game went on without issue. And that's the proper way to go about doing it. So you still can forfeit a game if the coaches meet that criteria based on criteria by coaches, players, or team personnel. All right. Again, we cannot do it if it's for for spectators. They want game management and school administrators for dealing with spectators. And I think this is a great point that we want game management to always address spectators. Don't even get in a dialogue with them from a negative standpoint. If they're heckling or they're doing something, or God forbid, if it's vulgarity, get a hold of the game management, ask them to address it. And I know in a lot of places that I officiate here in Illinois, a lot of teams don't have lights. And so we're going to stop the game until that matter's taken care of. All right. Malicious contact. This is a point of emphasis. And again, I'll remind everybody, when we talk about points of emphasis, these aren't rule changes. These rules have been in play for a while, but perhaps we're just not calling them, if you will. And I take this as them trying to give us a definition of malicious contact, because even though in theory baseball could be a non-contact sport, there are times when collisions are going to happen. And the example here is, here's a wild throw. Takes the first baseman in there, and it may look like he's tagging him hard, but he's just trying to get a tag. And so what you want to look at when you're talking about malicious contact is, was there excessive force or was there intent to injure? If either of those two factors are there, then you want to consider it malicious contact. And as everybody knows, malicious contact means that not only is the player out, but he will be ejected from the game. Now, in this example, this would be the defensive player. If you felt that that was excessive contact, then you would eject that defensive player and everything. But again, was it excessive force and intent to injure? That's what we got to ask ourselves. Here's one that's another one. We do see this occasionally. Um, Sometimes they're sliding and the foot's higher than the knee. That's not the act that would cause malicious contact. But if now all of a sudden he continues and now he throws his spike in there and with excessive force and then even takes him to the ground and spikes him, that's where we would have malicious contact and that player would be ejected. Um, so you got to look for this stuff. That would be an illegal slide, but that slide itself is nothing unless, again, we have intent to injure or excessive force on the defensive player side. So you want to make sure you recognize that. Um, the next thing that's a point of emphasis is profanity, right? Look at Federation sports, high school sports is a education-based curriculum, and it should be an extension of the classroom. And I'm sure we've all been sports officials, whether it's in baseball or other sports. You know, I've always said I'm sure a math teacher doesn't talk to their students like that coach talks to me sometimes. But the key thing here is that it's not tolerated. What I would tell you is this, and then guys, listen, this is from them. We should never, ever use profanity. Um, Whether you agree or disagree with that, when we step on the field as officials in any sport, we always have to take the high road because, you know, as they always say, two wrongs don't make a right. We're the ones that have to make sure that we always maintain calmness, and that's not always easy to do, but we have to make sure that our language isn't equally as foul because it doesn't seem right that we would eject somebody for swearing at us, but there's nothing for us if we're doing the same. So, and what I would tell you is this: in sports, you may have a kid, you know, ground out, and maybe he has a profanity. If it's something that you hear and do it, I wouldn't act on it because he's frustrated. Um, if it is something loud enough to where everybody heard it, you have to address it. You need to say, hey, that's enough. And then get the coach, say you need to talk to him and do that. Now, in this example, you're just assuming that, you know, whatever the discussion is between the umpire and the head coach, he used some explicit words there that were profanity and directed directly at that coach, and that's an automatic ejection. And what I would tell you is this: um, if you eject somebody and for whatever you eject them for, but especially profanity, you have to write exactly what they said. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't use, you know, don't put the F word and then these characters. Spell it out and say it directly as it was said. And you want to be 100% accurate because these schools will follow up the IHSA because you would have to fill out a report. You probably have to tell your assigner, and you want to make sure that it's accurate. So when they go to the coach, the school can say, "Hey, you said this to a umpire," and so don't embellish it, but just be right to the point. All right. Again, for minor offenses, it could be a verbal warning. That's what I talked about earlier. Um, but if it's of a major offense, like especially if they turn and say you, you know, the old rule of thumb is when they start with the word you, pretty much anything following that, unless they say you are the greatest umpire that ever came out here, your ears should be ready for an ejection. So um, the other thing I want to point out, they talk about written warnings. You could do this, um, but I want to make sure that if you were to give somebody a warning, we want to write that down. And a lot of times, whenever you have ejections, if you have the opportunity to warn first and then eject because they didn't take your warning, it looks great on a report. And as I said, when they follow up with it, they can go, well, he warned you in the second inning, and then you did it again in the third inning. Why would you do that? But it doesn't mean if I write it down and make a note so that I can remember what I'm going to be telling, in my report, that automatically constitutes a written warning. That's not what that means. And for me, I'm going to give you a warning or I'm going to eject you. I'm not going to write it down and then put you into the bench. That's my take of it. However, on behalf of the Federation, be very cautious, especially at lower levels. If it's in the adult coach, you use your tools, keep him in the game, because if there's only one adult coach, you really don't want to forfeit that game unless he really does something that is a major offense. So, all right, pace of play, guys. Again, remember, these rules have always been in place. We're seeing this at the major league level. If you talk to a major league umpire, they'll tell you right now they're saving about 30 minutes per game. At the collegiate level, they are. This has always been our rule, but we don't carry stopwatches. We don't have visual. All of these higher levels have installed visual aids so that they can enforce the 20 seconds. This is a tool in your bag that if players aren't ready, if the pitcher is, walking around the mound, and we're ready to play, some tools like, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. If he's still not doing it, then this is where you go, okay, guys, I'm going to start putting you on a clock. So it may be something that if you're doing two-man crews, you could maybe, if your partner has a stopwatch, just have it. Don't use it unless you need it. But this rule here is to protect us so that we can get the pace of play going. But we're not going to be enforcing this like you're seeing at the collegiate level. But know that it's there, and it says it's been there since the 70s. So this is not a new rule. By rule, the time between innings is, again, this is a pet peeve of mine. Once the game starts, remember, at the beginning of the game, we give pitchers 8 warm-ups. After that, it's 5 warm-up pitches or 1 minute. Now, you're going to see this 1 minute and 20 seconds. The time between pitch innings is 1 minute. The reason they're saying 20 seconds, because in 1 minute, it should be play, and then you got 20 seconds to pitch the ball. Don't take this as saying, oh, now in between innings, it's 5 pitches or 1 minute and 20 seconds. No, nothing has changed. It's 5 pitches, 1 minute. And guys, it's 5 pitches. Don't sit there and go, oh, he pitched 5 in 30 seconds. Okay, good for us. And one of the things that I do, and you should get in this habit, I tell that to my catchers. And when they come out, I'll say, Joe, you got 5. And then I'll stand there and watch them. And then I'll turn to everybody and go, got 2 left. And then we're going to go. All right. But I want to point out that the minute and 20 seconds is including, once the minute ended, we got 20 seconds to start that pitch. Again, just spells it out with the exception, again, the batter is allowed to leave the batter's box, and this is all the exceptions when they can leave a batter's box. Other than that, in between pitches, in between a ball or a strike, we want him to be ready. We want to keep pace of play. You got to keep 1 foot in the box, even if he's looking for a sign. And that 20 seconds doesn't always come into play for the pitcher, the batter as well. All right. This is just telling you about how we monitor it and everything. If you don't have a watch, I will tell you it's hard to monitor unless you're going to count. So the other thing here is excessive conferences. Here's one of the things that we can control. And I'm not talking about the coaches. You could see there isn't a coach here, because at the coaches, we have a rule that says how many times he can come out to have conferences. With players, we don't. And how many times you get the throw comes in a shortstop, time, I want to go talk to my pitcher, or, the pitcher's struggling, time, can I go talk to my pitcher? I'm not telling you not to allow that. I'm suggesting that you don't want to allow it with great regularity. All right. And that's this key. Same thing. How many times does the catcher get or the shortstop gets the ball and he turns to you and says time? Say no, you don't need time. Throw the ball to the pitcher. Keep the game going. Right.